As the Disney company gears up for Frozen 3, 4, and also a Broadway version of Frozen, you would think that they're betting big on Jennifer Lee, the now former head of Walt Disney Animation Studios. However, yesterday morning we found out that not only has Jennifer Lee been demoted, she's been replaced by Jared Bush, who's the supposed director of Zootopia 2 and maybe the uncredited director of Moana 2. We've got Alan Ng from Film Threat, and of course you might know him from the D-Files, here to talk about that with us here on That Park Place. We've got another guest joining us, and I am so glad that we have him here today. Alan Ng from Film.
Hey,
hey, Alan.
I am literally just hearing about this, and so I haven't read the articles, but I'm fairly intimate with the with the drama that has happened since she had come on board as head of Walt Disney Animation.
So we were actually just shouting you out because we were saying that you guys had this way ahead, and many people out there would be completely blindsided if not for you and Chris covering this over at Film Threat. So I think it's time to give you just an applause and kudos. You guys really made this available to the public to understand what's happening.
Well, thanks. But obviously I have to thank, I'll call them the whistleblowers, who just reached out to us and really gave us kind of the behind the scenes of what really happened, which literally began with the firing of John Lasseter.
Mm-hmm. So she's been in charge since 2018, and we've been discussing what was Lasseter and what was Jennifer Lee. So the brief recap of this breaking news today is that Jared Bush, who is the director of Zootopia 2, among other things, he's been on the Disney Story Trust for a long time. He is now the head of Disney Animation, and Jennifer Lee has been demoted to director of Frozen 3 and only screenwriter on Frozen 4, effective immediately.
Yes. I don't know much about Jared Bush, but I think the conclusion I came to at the end of the D-Files was, you can be a good writer, but that doesn't make you a good head of an animation studio. They're two completely different jobs. And it was clear from the get-go that she was hired because she was a woman, and B, when she got hired and put into place, that she was going to radically change the makeup of Disney animation, which she did. She was very successful in that.
How many years do you think it'll take to fix that, Alan? How long term is the damage?
The worst part, the worst damage that was caused by her was basically the entire old guard is gone. Even I believe it was Don Hall, yep, who kind of stayed behind to kind of shepherd and guide the new crew coming in. Well, he's gone now. He's over at Skydance as well.
That's very true. And we're hearing D23. There were announcements like Incredibles guy Brad Bird, is coming back, and that Andrew Stanton is coming back, and that Andrew Stanton will be the writer and director over at Pixar. Obviously, those are Pixar productions, and we were going to cover the Inside Out 2 story, and that Pete Docter is essentially the co-director, uncredited co-director on Inside Out 2. So, and that they have now created the same bottleneck, which I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I think it's actually a very good thing that they've turned Pete Docter into the bottleneck at Pixar. Yeah. It sounds like if that bottleneck at Disney Animation was Jennifer Lee, that was a disaster situation. Can you talk about? Of course, you can take this wherever you want. You're an expert witness here, Alan, because you know more than we do. But can you talk a little bit about Raya and the Last Dragon and your experience that you wrote about in the D-Files?
Yeah, I can't get into more details than what's in the D-Files, but what happened with Raya and the Last Dragon? That was literally John Lasseter's last project before they got rid of him, and so the team was in place. There were 2 directors involved. Adele Lim was involved, and they were moving forward with it. And then after Lasseter was fired, Jennifer Lee just kind of came in, and she basically moved the 2 directors. Surprisingly, they were white guys. And then Adele Lim was there. And sources tell me that that Adele and Jennifer Lee didn't exactly get along, but she kind of stuck it out to the end of the project because I think she felt it was important that her voice be in that. But there were a lot of radical changes that occurred. I would say not radical changes, but a new direction in terms of how female characters are portrayed in Disney films from now on. and a lot of it was the idea of we don't need no man. And so any opportunities for a man to kind of come in and save the day or lend help and aid was immediately removed. And then we could talk about the desire to go 50-50 equity in terms of animators, and how they, basically wanted, half female, half male animators. And
you're talking about half of the animators would be male and half of the animators would be female, not the other thing that they're also maybe pushing for within the company.
Yeah. And the other thing was, obviously only female animators can animate female characters. And so a lot of the men and a lot of the veteran men were pushed off to doing atmospheric work, doing special effects.
So stupid. Can you imagine asking a female painter to stop before she gets to the point of painting a man and bring in somebody else? It's ludicrously dumb.
Yeah. And then, we uncovered in the D-Files that, the reality was there wasn't the supply of female animators of quality was not there. And they went to, as Nipane says here, they went to Women in Animation, who then went to Tumblr and then found artists that way.
And I always love Nipane's comments. He's informed, but he's also very measured on subjects like this. So I always appreciate his commentary. So Raya and the Last Dragon, as you're describing, in order to get to that 50-50 equity, they brought in a bunch of people, but that wasn't enough. And then they started to purge a certain number of white men to try to get to that 50-50 equity, if I'm understanding it.
Yeah.
And the thing that you talked about was, I don't want to say struggle sessions necessarily, although it does sound like that was involved, that there became some form of witch hunts within the company.
Yeah. I mean, if you were a old white guy, you were dealt with one of two ways. You either bent the knee and you complied, or they made life miserable for you so that you would quit, or they would find something you said or did, or some offhand comment that was basically in confidence, and then they would nail you that way. And then you'd have to go to DEI trainings, and the place just became toxic, and it became definitely a us against them situation, where the new women coming in were given preferential treatment, given a lot of power to, given a lot of power to be able to just walk into HR and accuse someone of something, whether it was true or not, or whether it was overblown or not.
Now, Lorena, as a highly credentialed person of color here, as a highly credentialed Black woman, you've had your own experiences with DEI and all of this. I would imagine you have some pretty interesting stories about corporate environments. How does this? What's your reaction to? And we talked about it a little bit back in the day, but what is your reaction when things like this go on in a workplace, especially for an extended period of time?
It's ridiculous. And honestly, it's insulting to women like me who have worked our way up based on merit, not, oh, we're going to hand this to you because you're a woman. There's a difference if it's like, okay, we're picking out these women who have proven themselves, and we just want to kind of put them in a better position because the talent is there. That's the difference. When you have this whole DEI thing going on, and I've seen this in several companies where the first thing they'll talk about is how diverse they are, and we're doing this DEI initiatives, and we're just going to, we're going to put these plans into action. Okay, so at my former company, I basically asked a question. I said, well, what do you plan to do to make things quote unquote equitable? This all sounds good, but what are you going to do about it? Well, we're still discussing what that is going to be. I'm like, oh, really? You don't have a plan. What you want to do is just show how great we are. And I can't tell you how many times that they will pass over a woman who is extremely qualified because they want to hire another female who is not qualified at all. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen They want to put certain women in positions they have zero skill whatsoever, and they want you to train them to do the job that they cannot do, rather than let the qualified woman actually do that particular job.
And I don't know how many times I've been in a corporate environment where someone just assumes proximity to the person who does the job is going to communicate everything. There has to be an engaged trainer and someone who is capable of learning the job. And I'm not saying, and that's not a gender thing, as I'm pointing that out. There's a lot of corporate environments where they just don't understand the nuance of jobs. I want to talk about, for just a minute here, some of the statements that they're making about Jared Bush here. Jared Bush is an incredible filmmaker and a talented executive who's been a prominent creative force at Disney Animation for the past decade, and I am thrilled that he'll be taking the reins of this storied studio, Bergman said. That would be Alan Bergman. I also want to thank Jennifer Lee for her passionate leadership of the studio over the past several years. She's made an indelible mark. That can be taken two ways. On both Disney Animation and the industry. I know she has so many more stories to tell, and there's truly no one better suited to oversee the continuation of the beloved story of Frozen. I'm also going to point out, Bob Iger made a comment to investors. It was not supposed to see the light of day, but we know from notes from people who were inside those meetings that they're giving existing franchises to unseasoned directors in order to give them the leg up. Otherwise known as they're giving them softballs here. So, anyways, I'm so deeply grateful to Bob Iger and Alan Bergman for their faith in me, and thankful to Jennifer for her leadership and for her generous support as she embarks on the next chapters of Frozen, said Bush, otherwise known as Jennifer Lee's new boss. Disney Animation is the home to some of the greatest stories and characters of the past century, and I'm so excited to work with the filmmakers. And there is a comment here from Jennifer Lee as well.
Oh my gosh.
Before we get to that, the D23, they had panels for Moana 2, and the history of Moana 2 has been interesting. Started out as a TV show for Disney Plus, and historically, TV shows based on animated films on Disney Plus have been hit or miss. Zootopia Plus is essentially a series of disconnected shorts that they tried to make into an overarching story. It's kind of bland. I think the play here is that they will distract your children long enough to keep them watching. David Derrick Jr. is the head of the production. The director on Moana 2. They take this, and it was going to be Moana the TV series, and they say it's going to be a movie actually, and so they have to retrofit this show into a movie in record time. They're trying to take something that was supposed to be told over however many episodes they want. And we could look at Agatha for pacing issues on the difference between TV and movies. And they give him basically no time in a studio that has never made a movie before and say, you're going to have a movie out by November of this year. In the middle of all that, they add in two people and say, I think the guy's name is Jason Hand from the Burbank studio, that he's also now listed as a co-director on Moana 2. And also, I want to say Allison Lee Sadu. I'm sure I'm getting that name wrong, but she's the screenwriter on the live action Moana. She said she didn't want to have anything to do with the Moana series based on interviews. And now she is listed as a co-director on Moana 2. I say all that to note that when they did a panel with all of these people at D23, the only one answering any questions on the creative direction on Moana 2 was Jared Bush. So what do you guys take from that combination of three, maybe four directors, one of them not getting a credit on this one?
Yeah, I'll say this. So we reported on this. It was near one of the earnings calls or one of the calls when they announced Moana 2. But the biggest surprise was that Moana 2 is being done at Walt Disney Studios, Vancouver. So it's being done in Canada, and reached out to some of my contacts. The feeling is that the Vancouver studio is actually in good hands, that there's a good guy in charge who understands the traditions of Disney and is guiding it, which is weird because, obviously Burbank is in big trouble now because that studio has been destroyed. And one of the things that happened after the Moana 2 announcements, they had to have an all hands in Burbank. And what was revealed at the all hands in Burbank was that the studio in Vancouver was reaching about 200 employees. which is what they were told was not going to happen. Was that that the Vancouver studio is going to be a small studio, and that instead it's become a full-fledged studio. And from what I'm being told is that it's not like it's not woke or it's not left-leaning, but the guy in charge hired good people from Canada. And it's almost as if they're saying that, well, we screwed up Burbank. Burbank went so far down the toilet that let's send it up to Vancouver and just kind of restart from there quietly. And that's what seems to be happening here. In terms of all the extra directors, it's just indicative of the fact that this is a rushed project. And Disney is, the last few films have been rushed films, where the majority of the animation was being done 6 to 9 months before release date. And so I think the feeling I get is that the extra directors are there to speed things along and to I think they need the extra help to kind of refigure it into a movie rather than a television show.
Right. And none of the directors of record on this production have ever directed anything in animation before. I think Sadhu Miller might have actually directed something live action before, but she even said in interviews, this is before I think she realized this was going to be on the record. It was a writer's podcast or something like that. She has a Pacific Islander heritage somewhere back in the day, which I think I'm going to say Disney appreciates that when they're looking for people to do a project like Moana. She was even talking about how she has no interest in animation and she doesn't have an interest in what Disney is doing. But all of a sudden, this person that they've been courting for a while is suddenly available for a project she said she didn't want to do, while she's also talking about, I don't know, sometime in the next few years, I'd like to be a director. And then within a week, she is the director of Moana 2. So I think that was probably some smart movement on the part of her business manager more than it was anything else. Guys, Lorena, Marvin, you've been quiet for a little bit. Sorry, Marvin, I brought you in and then threw breaking news at you.
Oh no, it's okay. It's a great conversation. I'm enjoying sitting back and listening to it.
Do you guys have anything you want to throw in on this before because we'll get some super chats and then we're going to talk about the situation out at Pixar, because it's sounding like the entire company is in flux here.
Well, I mean, it's pretty common for a high-ranking executive who worked their way up the system to all of a sudden be like, nah, never mind, right?
Right.
Happens all the time, right, Lorena?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. I think I'd rather take this subordinate of mine and have him be my boss now. This is very clearly she got the hammer brought down on her, and now all of a sudden has to pretend that it's just because she has such a passion for Frozen. It's the story to speak to her. She has to step down and give up all this money and all this power because she just has to tell the rest of Elsa's story, right?
As someone who's been a spectator and participant in the C-suite games in corporate America, I can't tell you how many problematic folks in the C-suite where their way of letting them save face is to basically knock them down a couple of pegs. And it's like, I want to get my hands back in the weeds of things instead of being out front. So I'm going to go back into this area that I'm super, super passionate about, when the reality is, look, you screwed up enough. We have to clean up your mess. So either you go down a couple of pegs and get disappeared, or you get out. Your choice. I have heard that conversation happen before.
Well, and when you look at the quote that she gave here, like, I'm so grateful for them for supporting my decision to return to filmmaking. Yeah, because this was all your idea, lady. This was entirely you. Nobody kicked you back down the ladder.
Oh my gosh, that's what PR told her to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but she didn't even. That was written for her. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm just going to point this out, by the way. A nice little rise in stock price here. I'm not saying this is her.
No.
By the way, I'm just pointing out correlation is not causation, right? Here, but let's read the quote and then they go through her bona fides here. Said Lee, I'm so grateful to Bob and Alan for supporting my decision to return to filmmaking full time. So she's saying this was what she asked for then, but maybe as we'll also talk about later, sometimes when you get specific with it, it means you're hiding something. Every day working with them is a masterclass in creativity, business, community, and integrity. with Bob Iger. I've always believed in Jared's incredible talent and can't wait to see, with his passion and dedication to animation, what he brings to the CCO role. For me, getting to collaborate with the studio of artists, animators, and storytellers is such a privilege, and I look forward to all we will create together. This is what I want to go through this list right here.
Can we just get Vince McMahon in here to go, yeah, fine.
Lee is the Oscar-winning screenwriter and director behind the Frozen franchise. Lee joined Disney in 2011 as co-writer of the Oscar-nominated Wreck-It Ralph, was involved in story building for Zootopia. By the way, Zootopia right here was a disaster until it wasn't. I do believe that, what is his name? Byron Howard and maybe also Jared Bush came in and fixed that one by the end. Maybe Rich Moore as well. The Story Trust eventually cracked that one. Served as executive producer on Encanto, Wish, Raya and the Last Dragon, and the upcoming Moana 2. Oh, here we go. She also oversaw Disney Animation's first foray into animated series, including Baymax, Uwaju, and Zootopia Plus. The less said about Zootopia Plus, the better. Iwaju was directed by a different studio, and Baymax, intended for 5-year-olds, and I always get pushback when I say this, but Baymax has a character who seems to be literally allergic to not being gay in it, in a show that is, again, intended for 5-year-olds. It's also the one where somebody with a trans flag on their shirt, with a masculine presenting voice, tells Baymax which are his or her favorite tampon brands, so he can break into a bathroom and provide them to a 12-year-old girl who is going through her first, we'll say blossoming, to use the old school phrasing here. So Jennifer Lee oversaw that one.
I think everything we needed to know about Jennifer Lee boils down to, remember recently she was asked if you could ask Walt Disney one question as the chief creative officer of Disney Animation, what would it be? And she responded, "How are the girls?"
Ooh.
What?
How are the girls?
How are the girls?
You're right.
Thanks for watching That Park Plays News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media account.